Okay, this is going to be a video response to an inquiry I received yesterday from one of my Blackfoot Phenology students. And it was a kind of a lengthy inquiry, about 3 paragraphs or so. And I've broken it down to really what I think are kind of 4 big questions. And I'm not going to say the student's name because I don't know if he would be comfortable sharing this broadly and having it linked with his identity. But I do want to say that I appreciate the inquiry. It's really important to ask questions. You know, ask questions. It's actually part of our protocol, you know, to ask questions. You don't really learn much if you don't. I remember one of my elders, the late Alan Pard, way back when I first was getting to know him, before he really officially became my elder and was transferring to me. I remember driving around with him one night, and he was telling me, you know, a lot of people in the community have been so influenced by the church and stuff, with this idea that you're not supposed to talk about certain things, or you're not supposed to ask questions about certain things. And he said that's not our protocol. Our protocol is to ask questions, and in fact, if you don't ask questions, you're not going to learn, because I'm not just going to offer it up. You know, that's not the way it's done. When somebody's ready to learn something, they'll ask a question about it, and then if you can help them with that question, great. You know, not all the time are you able to help them with that question. And you know, I think the makings of a good elder is also to have the ability to say, you know, I don't know sometimes. Like, if you don't know, then you don't know. Don't make anything up. Just tell it like it is. Okay? So, that said, I do appreciate the inquiry, and I'm making a video because I think the questions in this inquiry are really important questions for phenology students, for my phenology course, and I think they'll be useful in the future to lots of people too. So I'm going to address each question, I think, separately in a separate little clip, and yeah, we'll just go into it now. So the first part of the inquiry revolved around how to pay attention, or what to pay attention to, how to conduct oneself in the moment at one's study site, at one's learning site in the phenology course. In my orientational video, I'd given some direction in regard to this, and that was reflected in the inquiry too. The student said, I remember that there were some important, you know, questions, a few important questions that you always had when you went to your site, which is basically like, who are you? If you meet somebody, a species that you don't know, who are you? And then, what's going on with you today? Like, what's going on in your life today? For those who you've already been introduced to or introduced yourself to. You know, these are some of the basic questions. And then, how do I be a human being here? Like, where do I fit into this whole thing? What should I be doing out here if I'm a real human being? What would I be doing? You know, some instances we can't even exercise the practice of being a real human being at our sites. You know, for instance, at my site, there's no fishing allowed, even though I can see large pike in the water. And you know, I'll admit I have poached some of them. But my last experience poaching some of those pike, I got approached by somebody who was going to try to police me, and it was embarrassing. So not all the time are we able to be a human being, but yeah, these are some of the core questions. They're not all of the core questions. These are some of the kind of the introductory questions, but they're also the very most important. It's just like anything else. The foundation is the essence, of the art, right? And names are important. And this student brought up that as well, that he recalls me saying that names are important, and they are, but it's only a first step. The process, as I see it, or as I've been practicing it myself, is to go to your site at least a couple of times a week, spend at least 2 hours at a stretch, maybe a little bit more, and basically the methodology that I'm advocating is what I'd call oxysoatop, which is visiting. So imagine yourself going to someone's home and sitting down at the kitchen table with them and visiting. You don't always have to bring a lot of questions with you. You might have some questions that you're bringing with you, but it's almost rude to jump into the conversation just with the questions. When you first arrive at your site, it's really kind of because you haven't scheduled or anything, you're just kind of showing up. I think what's appropriate is to kind of get yourself contextualized. Walk around, see what's happening, see what's new. You might bump into somebody you've never seen there, a bird or something like that you've never seen. So then the who are you question comes up. Might be that everybody there is familiar with you, and then your questions might be, and you don't necessarily have to approach it even like a question. It's really just getting yourself situated in there. You can be aware of what are they doing today, hey? What's going on with them? You're going to gain a lot of information from that alone, hey? It's just like sitting with somebody at their dining room table to visit, to catch up. You're going to share what's new, right? What's going on. You might ask like something like "Getrzimanists." Getrzimanists means what have you heard, or what's your news? This is a good question to ask some of the species out there who are more aware, like the corvids, the magpies, the crows, the ravens. You might ask them what's the news, and they usually will show you what's happening out there. What's the big events of the moment for them in their lives, and it often leads you to find things to like say there's an insect hatching, something like that, or an animal's been killed, or there's something laying eggs, and so the corvids are stealing eggs. They're going to show you all kinds of like new things out there that you might not have observed otherwise. So paying attention to what the others are paying attention to is a way to direct your attention that's important while you're there. And of course, asking yourself like what one of the things that sometimes I'll bring student groups out there from the schools here in Lethbridge. I'll have grade 5s and 6 or 7s or whatever, whole classroom full of kids, and almost the first thing that I ask them when they get off the bus at the wetlands is what time is it? And they all say it's 12:30 or whatever, and May 12th, whatever, right? But then I'll ask again, okay, well that's a model of time, but what time is it for, like what time is it for the beavers right now? What are they doing? What time is it for the oriole right now? What are they up to? What time is it for human beings here? What would we be doing, if we weren't wrapped up in this mainstream culture and we were actually living engaged with the phenology and the ecology of our environment, and feeding, taking part in that energy exchange that is the core of the relationship, the ecological relationships between everybody out there. Hope that wind isn't interfering. But yeah, these are the kind of questions you can ask, and the kind of things to pay attention to. But it's not all, right? Part of Blackfoot learning involves a lot of personal. I don't want to use the same tropes as English, like exploration and discovery or these kind of things. It's not so much that, but a good elder is not going to spoon feed you the knowledge, right? You have to chase it, because in the chasing you end up really embodying the learning. Whereas if I just tell you what's going on, it won't be as significant to you. You won't have the learning experience of recognizing something and asking questions and following those questions and finding an answer, through your engagement with your sight, right? So, not that I won't help, and we'll get to what I feel like as an instructor, what I feel like my responsibilities are in this course, right? And in terms of guiding you. But I will give you a concrete example. Maybe 20 years ago, I was transferred an Miskin. An Miskin is a buffalo stone. It's a bacillite fossil, but it's shaped like a little buffalo, and it's a sacred item in the Blackfoot tradition, because the Miskin were a real shift in Blackfoot technology. In the really old days, the buffalo hunting methodology was something that the people had acquired from the wolves. The wolves had taught them. And so it was basically an endurance hunt, running down the buffalo until they tired, just like the wolves do, and then getting them. But that changed with the Miskin. The Miskin enabled the buffalo to be called to the people, and these little bacillite fossils are part of that complex. They were the source of the revelation of Miskin. There was a time when people were picking, where people couldn't get much buffalo. The buffalo were scarce, and people were kind of starving. And this woman went down to the coulee and she was picking rose hips. So this must have been in the winter, or going into the winter at the very least. She was out there picking rose hips, and she heard this song. She's looking around for the source of this song, and she finds this stone, this buffalo-shaped stone sitting on a log, and he continues to sing to her. O mataki o mato kirome, Nita to soyo mai, ya hey hey. Basically says, woman, pick me up. I'm powerful, I'm sacred. So she picked him up, and then through his songs, he transferred her the revelation of the Miskin. Those are my words, the revelation of the Miskin. I've never heard anybody else call it that, but that's the way I think about it now. So I was transferred one of these, and these are supposed to help you acquire food, right? They're for like stoapi. I think I've talked about in the course that sometimes you can limit or narrow down what's important in the Blackfoot tradition to two values, stoapi and gamodapi. Stoapi is everything that nurtures and provides maturation and growth, you know, and fortune and luck. Gamodapi is escaping from danger, you know, everything that you use to defend yourself or to stay out of harm's way. And the Miskin was stoapi. It's for the acquisition of, much easier acquisition of bison, because you could use the Miskin to call the bison to you. And I was transferred this along with one of the songs, not the one I just sang you, but another, the one that you get when you're transferred. And I knew the story, and I knew the song, and I had it in Miskin, and I thought I knew my stuff. And one day I was out with another elder, not the one who transferred to me, but with another one. I was with a class, and I brought the elder along, and we were at a sacred site, and we were wandering around, and there was a big boulder that looked like a bison calf laying on the ground. And the elder told me, let's go look around this bison, this calf-shaped rock. Oh, that wind's getting worse. Let's go look along this calf-shaped rock. We might find a Miskin. And I knew that that's not where you find bakelite fossils, hey? Because I know down in the coulee there's a certain strata in the soil in the coulees that those fossils come out of. They don't just come out of buffalo-shaped rocks on the prairie. So, but I didn't tell him this, and I didn't tell him, I knew anything about Miskin. I just followed him, and I was kind of humoring him, and he was looking around this rock and picking up little stones and such. Oh, this isn't it, this isn't it. I was picking up little stones, and same thing, just humoring him. And he said, well, I guess we're not going to find a Miskin here, but I bet if we go down into the draw a little ways, we're going to come across another one of these boulders like this. Maybe there's an Miskin down there. And I don't know how he knew about that other boulder, but we walked toward the coulee draw, and sure enough, there was another big boulder there very close by that the cattle had been rubbing on. It had lots of cow dung and stuff around it. And he said, maybe we'll find a Miskin here. So we're looking around for the Miskin. Again, didn't find it, and he said, well, I guess we're not going to find it today. Let's go back up. So we went back up, and he says, I'm going to sing you half of that song for the Miskin. I'm going to sing you the first part. So he sang it to me, the first part of that song. And then he told me, when you find the Miskin, you come tell me, I'll sing you the other half of that song. So we left the site, and I left kind of thinking this elder doesn't know what he's talking about a little bit with the Miskin. But, it seemed odd to me, and so, just like the fact that pretty well-versed elder would be off base like this made me kept thinking about it. And then eventually it dawned on me, oh, those boulders are the Miskin. Those boulders are the Miskin. This little fossil that I'm transferred, they just represent those boulders. Hey, they're just a the key to it is that you have a boulder in the shape of a bison that the bison will see from far away and think it's a buffalo calf, and they'll go to it. And so they can be brought right into an ambush in this way. This was the revelation, and she had that revelation because she found that little Miskin. Okay? But I don't think how important that is, that revelation to the changes in Blackfoot hunting technology. I don't think it really would have sunk in and hit home for me if the elder had just been straight out, well, this is the Miskin, you know. He had to challenge me to find it myself, right? And if I hadn't found it, then I wasn't ready to find it. That's just how it is. Blackfoot learning is not, again, it's not spoon-fed, right? You're given a task. You know, you're given a task or a thinking exercise, and you're left to do it. And what you get from it is what you're going to get from it. And you might not get anything from it, or you might get a real strong revelation that changes your way of understanding things and thinking. But it's all depends on if you're ready for that, eh? And so your history of experience plays into that. And maybe if I was never transferred in Miskin, I wouldn't have understood. I don't know. So this is the teaching methodology, the part of the pedagogy in Blackfoot learning is not really to give it all to the student. The student should learn for themselves, and in that learning, that student might realize something that the teacher doesn't know, and it might help the teacher gain knowledge too. So when you go out to your site, you know, there's no thing, that no way of approaching it other than, like I'm saying, Oxisawatop. You're going to visit. You're going to see what's new. You're paying attention to what's happening in all the lives out there, how everybody's related. You know, you look at community. If you want to get to know people in a indigenous community, you have to understand their relations to one another. Same thing if you want to really understand the animals and plants in a certain place, you need to know their relations. So you should be paying attention to those too. Ask them, you know. You know, who are you going along in life with? What do you like, who are you feeding? Hey, who are you feeding, or who are you sheltering, or where are you finding food? Where are you finding shelters? You know, does anybody use you as a medicine? Lots of different relational questions you could be asking. I gave you foundational questions to work with, but you can come with your own. Hey, you can come with some of your own. You should be developing as you go along in the course, and asking, you know, more and more complex questions. And you want to approach it differently. Like, sometimes you want to go and sit, sometimes you want to walk around, sometimes you want to focus on a particular species. You know, just spend time with that one. Sometimes you want to survey and see everybody. Sometimes you want to be in harvest mode. You know, we're going into the season now when we can start exercising some of our humanness in gathering plant materials to eat out there, at the very least, right? So I hope this makes it more clear. I'm not sure that it will. But if there's more questions, ask more questions. So that's the first part of the inquiry. All right, so a related question that I would consider separate but related had to do with BoMUX. You know, how do you go about pursuing BoMUX and transfer? Because I had mentioned in my orientation that, or in one of my videos, that transfer is important. This is another aspect of Blackfoot epistemology. How do we know what we know? You know, in the mainstream, it's all about really personal discovery, right? This is it's a very individual act, the learning thing. And as I talked about, you know, in the Blackfoot sense, there's an aspect to that as well. In some respects, it's even more individualistic because you're given, you know, when you are transferred Blackfoot knowledge, you're given some core things. Usually you're given a song, you know, with a spiritual transfer. But with the knowledge transfer in general, you know, you're told the foundational material. But then it's up to you to live it, and in the context of living it, to be learning. And that living it is a relational thing, hey? Like, you're not out there just to discover on your own. You're out there to learn from others, from the ones who are out there, right? They're your teachers. The site is your teacher, and all the species in it are your teachers, your potential teachers, right? So those are the ones you go and visit. You don't even have to have a question. You can just go spend time out there with them and just be aware of what's going on, and you'll come out with some knowledge. Or you might have a question, you know, something might not make sense to you that you see, and then question arises and you pursue it. BoMUX is when something, another being gives you some knowledge, right? Gives you something, transfers it to you. And I was asked to give a concrete example of that, so I will give a concrete example. One summer, Mahoney and I, my wife and I, spent pretty much every evening down across the water from a beaver lodge, and we were trying to learn from the beavers. Okay, we were spending time with the beavers. We were visiting them every evening, and at first they didn't want us there, really. You know, they came splashing their tail and tried to scare us off. And when we didn't leave, eventually they got used to us being there, and they didn't mind us so much. And then one evening, 2 beavers swam from the lodge, and they swam straight over to us. And one of them climbed ashore right by Mahoney, and the other one went to the shore line right beside me. And these beavers were so close that, you know, I could have reached out and touched the one that was by me. Mahoney could have reached out and touched the one that was by her. That's how close they were. And the one that came out on the shore by Mahoney started doing something, started working with a particular plant. I won't say what that plant was, because Mahoney doesn't like me to tell people. Because what she did with that plant, Mahoney considers it to have been transferred to her. The beaver came, they could have went anywhere along the shoreline, but they came right to us. And that beaver climbed up on shore, started working with that plant, and Mahoney was watching it, and I was watching. I was leaned over and I was watching what was happening. And me being leaned over watching what was going on with that beaver, I was ignoring the one that was right next to me. And then that one slapped his tail on the water, and I looked over, and if a beaver could look disgusted, that beaver looked disgusted. He gave me just a disgusted look. He slowly turned around and he swam back to the lodge. And I think that they had come to transfer to us, and Mahoney had received her transfer, but I was paying attention to the women's transfer, and as a result I missed the man's transfer. That beaver that came beside me, he probably had something that he was going to show me or do with me, but because I was watching the other one, he said, "Oh, the hell with you," and he went on his way, and I missed my transfer. But Mahoney did get hers, hey? And so every summer she uses some of that plant the way that she saw the beavers use it. So that's an example of transfer. Sometimes you'll know what you're after in terms of a transfer, and you'll directly pursue that. Other times you just know that all of these animals have things, they have gifts, they have, they've embodied ways to get their foods, ways to get their medicines, ways to build their shelters, ways to protect themselves, ways to defend themselves, ways to, all of these different ways to relate with one another, ways to coexist with others who you wouldn't think that they'd get along with. These are all important skills, right? This is the foundational stuff that, this is the Blackfoot project, really, is learning from the ones who are here longer. The adaptations that they've developed for this place to live here and be successful. So sometimes just going and spending a lot of time with a particular species, and then you'll get transfers. Okay? They'll show you things, you'll learn things from them that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. That's BoMUX. Alright, a third part of the inquiry was basically the question, what's different between what we're doing and what a mainstream student of ecology or phenology or biology might do? Like, what makes the approach that we're taking Blackfoot, what's different? If I went to school, to the university to learn something about my environment, how would my experience be different? First of all, we've already talked about some of this, right? I've already talked about the learning methodology like oxysoatope, to visit. You don't have that methodology taught to you as a university, in the universities. They don't teach oxysoatope. They teach scientific method. Develop a hypothesis, test it, see what results. Most, students of biology and ecology and phenology and stuff, in the sciences that are trained professionally, most of them don't carry out their studies right in the field. Sometimes they do. There are field biologists and field ecologists and stuff. But when you're using the scientific method, a lot of times you want to take the whole wider life system out of the picture and narrow down, to a particular study. So you want to isolate the species that you're looking at, so there's no interference, right? And it's an attempt to fast track learning, and it sometimes works, but it often misses a lot. Hey, you also would be exposed to a lot of literature, and you would be expected to approach your learning as a scholar as much as a field researcher, right? So you would have to be engaged with the literature. I don't, not that I'm against the literature or anything, or lit review as a way to learn. I don't think it's research. A lot of people consider going to the library research. I don't think it's research. I think what we do is out in the field is real research. When you go to a library, you're just reading what somebody else researched, which is usually they might not even researched it themselves. They might have just pooled a bunch of other scholarship together to come up with their conclusions. And what happens is you end up with a lot of misinformation too. Like, say for instance, I'll give you a concrete example. The herpetologists. We have here a snake called the wandering garter snake. It's very common here. And so the wandering garter snake is the only garter snake that is a constrictor, that it will constrict its food, right? And I've seen this with my own eyes. I've video recorded it. A wandering garter snake constricting a mouse, killing it, then eating it, killing it through constriction, then eating it. But the herpetologists, because they haven't been able to get that to happen in a laboratory, don't believe it. They believe that the wandering garter snake will hold its food. It looks like constriction, but it's not. They'll hold it while they eat it. I grew up with constrictors from the time I was 8 years old, so I know what constriction looks like when I'm seeing it. And what I've seen with wandering garter snakes is constriction. And I've only seen that because I spend time out there, and I come across things like that accidentally. You know, I'm just in the space where the stuff is happening, where these animals are living their lives, and spending enough time there, you see things, okay? You see things that the scientists are not going to see because they're trying to control the learning experience in a way that I'm not, right? So this is a big difference. They're also not necessarily asking the same questions. Like the whole question of how do I fit in here? What am I supposed to be doing today? They don't ask that question. So there's all kinds of differences between what we're doing and what a mainstream scientist will do. And you know, if you go talk to somebody who's in grad school for biology or ecology, and you'll quickly learn, you know, after this class, hey, after you've finished a year of phenology with me, and you've seen some stuff and you've learned some stuff, go visit a biology department and act naive. Ask them some questions about the ecology, things that you know the answers for. See if they know them. I think you're going to find that even grad students, they spend so much time in the walls of the academy that they don't know as much about the local environment and the local ecology as a first year student, as somebody that's finished 1 year of my Blackfoot ecology and Blackfoot phenology studies. I think that's what you'll find. Challenge you to do that. It's a different learning experience. You brought up the question of data was brought up. You know, how do I know that I'm getting the right data, or this or that? You're not looking for data per se. I mean, I know it's just a word. There's no right data and no wrong data. You're trying to take in as much as possible. Okay? This epistemology is a broad scope, casting the wide net. It's not focused. It can be focused when you come up with a question, but you spend time out there and you just let the broad net bring in learning for you, right? And then when something occurs that you naturally are inclined to inquire about, that's your question to pursue, you know. And you might have questions that are easily answered, and you might have questions that take 10 years to answer. You might have questions that will never be answered. And you might not know all the questions. Well, you're definitely not going to know all the questions to ask, right? So this is my perspective on the difference. There are many differences between the mainstream and the approach that I'm teaching. All right, the last part, the fourth part of the inquiry, had to do with I've set up a Facebook page specifically for students of my phenology course, and I asked people to take field notes, make field notes, take pictures and this and that, post that stuff on the Facebook page, share it. And so the question is, like, is there something more that people should know about that, right? Because say a guy posts 20 pictures and I respond to a couple of them, say something about a couple of them, but ignore some of the others, you know, is he taking, like, is he doing it wrong? Is he, you know, are these pictures not worth responding to? Or are the observations not worth the responding to in the field notes? You know, what are you supposed to be getting out of that part of the experience? So again, this is a relational context, because now we have the people who are all participating in this course are on this page and exposed to this material together. So how do you make use of that? When I comment on something, it's because I have an answer. I have something that I can help with, and I can say, and I can guide. If you're right in the same kind of area as me, right in the kind of environment that I study in, I'm going to have a lot more that I can contribute than if you're at one of the other, like, northern or southern extremes of Blackfoot territory, where the players in the environment are a little bit different, some of them, right? In that case, you know, there might be stuff at your site that I never see, and I don't know. I don't know the identity of them, okay? And I don't know their relationships to others. And so for me, you know, it's a learning experience to kind of watch what others are encountering at their sites. But I think one of the good ways that you can use the Facebook page is, again, to ask questions, right? And not, you know, not just of me, the instructor, but you could be asking fellow participants, oh, do you see this at your site? Have you seen this happening? Have you seen that happening? If not, you know, that's okay too. Everybody's site is going to be different. The learning experience and what you're going to get in your time is going to be different for everybody, right? So, you know, I think it's just a good way. Like, this is the first time that I've tried to run the course online, so it's a learning experience for me, and I'm hearing the frustration in the question, and I've got to do some of my own thinking about how to make that experience more beneficial to people, I guess, right? But the way that I have it set up is basically so that it can provide a venue where we can do comparative studies, you know, with one another's sites and what's going on, and we can see that the phenology changes a little bit depending on if you're further north or further south, the timing of different events, right? So I think it's just important to be exposed to what everybody else is seeing, and to everybody else's kind of learning epiphanies and things like this. That's what it's really there for, you know. I feel as an instructor, like my main responsibilities are to introduce you to some of the species you might encounter, introduce you to some of the things that I've learned about the relationships between the lunar cycles and the behaviors of plants and animals and the ecological relationships between them, introduce you to some of the things that I've learned, but I don't know it all. And that's part of my responsibility. Another part of my responsibility is to host the venue for you, where you can have access to what others are doing in one easy place. Another part of my responsibility, I feel, is to introduce the Blackfoot knowledge components about things when certain species have given the Blackfoot people a lot, contribute a lot to the culture, others have not. So when there's something culturally relevant, I usually will teach that, include it in my lectures. I also think it's my responsibility to, of course, look at everything that everybody's posting and respond where appropriate. And I feel it's my responsibility to give you the exercise, to tell you, okay, this is what I want you to go do, which I have, and you've been doing, right? Go to the site, spend time there, try to be aware, alkakios, and that awareness, try to be aware of everything that's happening. It's alkakiosin is an objective that's unreachable ultimately, but you can try as much as you can. Try to be as aware as much as you can. And so don't try to what should I focus on? Everything. You should focus on everything. What data should I collect? All of it. You should look at everything that's happening. And out of that big picture, you're gonna have things come through that you're gonna learn. Have you learned yet? I don't know. Do you know the same things today out there at your place that you knew when you started this course? If you've been in the course a few months, I think you probably learned some things. And then you're aware of some mysteries, you're aware of some gaps, right? So you're following those gaps, and as we go into this season and things start to go into bloom, some of those mysteries, the identity mysteries will become revealed, So yeah, that's my input on that one. So hopefully I've answered your questions a little bit, maybe, and if not, maybe reframe the questions again and I'll give it another shot again.